Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 2nd of April 2015, just after 1 o'clock. And welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, John Shackleton. And behind the technical desk is Nick Green. Well, a bit of a gloomy day in Plymouth. Not too chilly, but rather unpleasant drizzle keeps coming in and the wind's quite strong. We think it's roughly the same across the rest of the country. Now, today we've got an important news, as we would say it always is. But towards the end of the news, I've got a personal announcement to make about information which has come to the column, which we think we have to push back for the general public to think about and respond to. So stay with us. We've also got a small embedded interview, which I did yesterday with Mark Anderson from American Free Press. And I'm sure you'll find that very pertinent and interesting. Well, I think we'll kick off with the sheer brutality of the British state, currently under, of course, the Conservative Lib Dem coalition. Well, of course not, because at the moment we don't have any MPs. Who's running Parliament, do we think, at the moment?
Nobody's running Parliament at the moment.
Nobody. Who's running the country?
Well, nobody's running the country. I think, the police, I think, would like to think that they're running the country.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? We've got a situation where Parliament's dissolved, so the MPs are earning money for doing no work. We are not sure who's running the country, but presumably the higher echelons of the civil service, Sir Bob Kerslake, or is it even Gus O'Donnell there somewhere hovering in the background? So interesting situation. But we know that the reality of life in Britain 2015 is not nice. Let's look at this Mail story where a veteran who suffered years in German prison camps and then did a particularly harsh forced walk as the Russians started to invade and move westwards. So the Germans started to move prisoners back west. And this gentleman, Robert Clark, was one of the prisoners at that time who underwent this horrific forced march in terrible weather conditions. Now, at the age of 96, Brent Council says, well, we can't really afford to pay the money for you to have sufficient care in your house. The gentleman is blind, so he needs to actually have a live-in carer. And, of course, what have they done? Well, they've use the false claim that there is no money to deny Mr. Clark proper care with dignity. Yet, of course, we know that corrupt international banks protected by this very government are creating billions of pounds from absolutely nothing. So this is the great David Cameron Conservative, Nick Clegg Lib Dem scam. We don't have any money. Well, we do. We could reintroduce the Bradbury pound. But the reality is we're not going to care for people like this that we owe our very existence and democracy to.
We do. We own our entire democracy. They've brought together our constitution. They've brought together our civil liberties, our civil rights, and now this poor man is getting his civil liberties broken and
denied.
They're getting denied completely. It's horrific, isn't it?
It's horrific, but it's the government, of course, that we, over many years, have all helped to bring into power. So what else is going on in the background? Well, the key theme, of course, is the abuse of children. And UK Column is absolutely not going to let go of this subject because this is at the heart of all political criminal activity in this country. So interesting story from the London Evening Standard here. And a woman suspected of trafficking 40 children into Heathrow as the ringleader of child sex smuggling gang arrested in Nigeria. Now, why were we so interested in this story? Well, let's remember what the two young Hampstead children talked about when they revealed the sickening abuse that they had suffered. And they said very clearly that other children were being brought into the country for abuse. They even mentioned Africa as a source and talked about children coming through airports. But it's taken a single judge, Mrs. Pawley, in a secret court to say that the video testimony of the children was effectively a myth And this single judge then blamed the mother for torturing the children in order to create a story which was complete myth. Well, we remind people that this gentleman, Ray Savage, is on video as an ex-policeman of 20 years and a former detective sergeant, saying that she, the mother, was speaking 110% truth, and also pointing out that there had been no proper police investigation of the case. So here we have the reality of what's happening in Britain. The British government, the political system, and the highest levels of the police are covering up the abuse of children and indeed the murder of children. What is the reason for that?
Well, they're not only covering it up, are they? I mean, if you look at it, some of these police constables are being promoted when they're making mistakes. It seems to be very crazy that you promote somebody who makes mistakes, they say sorry, and they get an extra £40,000 plus in their pay packet. I mean,
it doesn't make sense, but perhaps we could say it does make sense if we start to look at how some of these people are trained. And of course, if we look at the training agenda of the political charity Common Purpose, which first came into power as a result of John Prescott, Deputy Prime Minister to Tony Blair. But then, of course, Common Purpose has drifted through the structure to enjoy the patronage of David Cameron under the Conservatives. What Common Purpose says, it's only natural to make mistakes. We all do it. It's just part of your professional career progression.
But don't you learn by mistakes, though? Because it seems that a few of these senior police officers that we're doing an investigation in currently, just trying to find out the facts, because we want to tell the truth on the news, don't we? We want the complete facts and we want to back them up, and that's what we try and do all the time on the UK column. So we investigate different areas, whether it's anybody, it doesn't matter whether it's police, a corrupt judge, an individual, social services, whatever the situation. And it's quite interesting. I looked at something today about this new organisation, which is NPOCC, is it?
NPCC, it's the
National Police Coordination Centre.
Right, okay.
And one of the guys there, a guy called Chris Greeney, he's a strategic lead and has expertise in domestic extremism. What is domestic extremism?
Well, I think,
sorry for the question.
I think it's us. I think it's us. You're not really, because I've challenged you a bit over the last couple of days. According to David Cameron, you are watching domestic extremism now, because anybody who dares to challenge this government, even if they are non-violent, you're a non-violent activist and you're effectively on the domestic extremist list.
So we're telling the truth, we're investigating properly, we're picking out news stories from various sources and agencies, and that makes us, what do I call it? That makes us domestic extremists.
Yeah.
Very interesting scenario, isn't it?
It is, and we're going to look into that deeper. Let's follow on from this story. So we'll stay on the subject of child abuse. Let's have a look at what the Nottingham Post has to say. Well, here they are. Police draw up an action plan to respond to a damning inspection report. And here's the lovely lady herself. This is Superintendent Helen Chamberlain. Let's see what she's got to say. Well, she's head of public protection at Nottinghamshire Police, and she said, "We welcome the inspection and the findings of the inspection. We've been working with our partners, including the local authorities and the CPS, to address some of the issues and have drawn up an action plan as requested. We have started, if not done, a lot of work already, and we're confident that within 6 months we'll see many improvements in our approach." Now, if we just look at that statement by her, the first thing she says is that she welcomes the inspection and the findings. Well, the findings are that there are shambles and they failed children. I don't know why she'd be welcoming that, but she seems to be. And we then see that she said, well, basically they've addressed some of the issues. Not all of the abuse issues, but some, and they're feeling quite pleased with that. But I'll just add this, and we can probably pull it apart a bit more. We're going to say this is utter propaganda, because this is the same Nottingham police that harassed and terrified abuse victim and whistleblower Melanie Shaw and made sure that she was put back in prison. And according to Melanie, Miss Chamberlain herself was in communication in rather dubious circumstances at various points. And yet here is this woman now being paraded. I presume this is the good-looking lady card being played here. Bit of a blonde bombshell. Let's put her in front of the police station to say, well, we haven't really sorted all the problems out, but we're very glad we've had a report criticising us.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we also do the story on Mickey, don't we? Mickey up in Nottingham and the guys, Mark Ceylon's up there and a good crew. In fact, if I may...
You may.
Yes. The Crawford family, specifically Tom, has got a meeting tonight in Nottingham, in Carlton. Now, if anybody wants the details, if they contact us at the UK column or contact myself or Brian or one of the team, we will direct you to where that meeting is going. But there's going to be some interesting speakers there, let's say, good friends of ours, good friends of the column, that are going to be there speaking on things like Nottingham Police and the paedophile ring, because Nottingham Council are also involved in these cover-ups and events, yes. So yeah, that's something that I wanted to put in there. And it's from 6 o'clock this evening, that is. Okay,
so we hope that those attending that meeting won't be regarded as domestic extremists by David Cameron. Well, if you are, don't worry about it. We'll be coming on to Mr. Cameron in a minute. But as we watch the police lie, put out propaganda, spin and deceit, we could ask the question, have the police changed in the performance of their duties as a result of training? And of course, it's been the UK column that's warned over many, many years about the infiltration of police training by organisations such as the political charity Common Purpose. But thank you very much to our viewers who sent us an email alerting us to this. Now, we're simply asking questions here, but here's CNN talking about the Lufthansa aircraft, German wings that crashed. There's a lot of speculation about it. And one of the things that's emerged is that the pilot was apparently having some depression issues. And of course, this has been picked up as a possibility for the subsequent crash of the plane. These are some of the comments that were within that CNN article. A spokesman for the prosecutor's office in Dusseldorf said Lubitz suffered from suicidal tendencies at some point before his aviation career. Medical records revealed that he was suicidal at one time and underwent psychotherapy before he got his pilot's license. And the prosecutor's spokesman has commented on that, but said there's no evidence suggesting that he was suicidal or acting aggressively before the crash. Now, I'd just like to highlight this little bit here of the psychotherapy, because if you look into psychotherapy, it is actually unregulated and it's causing great controversy with clinical psychologists and indeed psychiatrists. And one of the things they say is that people are using these sorts of techniques, but they're not really clued up on what the total effects can be. Now, if there are people out there who are psychotherapists, they'll be saying, but we only go out to help people. My point is that you would presumably know the medical and mental health history of any person you were going to use psychotherapy upon. However, what we know is going on, that many quasi-political organisations are using therapeutic type techniques, but of course with little understanding of what the effects are. So we just put that one back on screen. Nick, let's add a bit to it, because this was the question we wanted to say. Did the pilot receive common purpose reframing as well as undergoing that psychotherapy? Now, why should we ask that question? Well, we're going to ask that question because this is what was sent through to us. Here's the Chief Executive, International Marketing Partners for Common Purpose, Alison Stewart-Allen, and she's award-winning Executive Education Program Director. She's worked with Fortune 100 companies, business schools, consultancies, creating memorable experiential programs with proven and lasting results. And she's worked with all sorts of people, including BAE Systems, HSBC, UBS, BBC Worldwide, Schroders, She seems to have been everywhere. If we have a look at this in a bit more detail, this was the bit that was pointed out. This lady has been designing, developing and delivering 3-module leadership programs for Lufthansa's top 110 leaders worldwide, further building their strategy, transformation and leadership capabilities. So the question was, as a result of this training, did Lufthansa go on and provide common purpose type training to pilots, for example? And if so, what did that training comprise? Before I just let you come in there, John, I'll follow the rest through. Designing, developing, delivering 3-module leadership programs for BAE Systems on their global activities. And if we just drop down one, advising a Japanese pharmaceuticals leader, Astellas, on aligning global virtual teams working to create life-changing therapies across the globe. I'm going to ask a question. Have you any idea what any of that means?
Right.
Sorry to do that to you live.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Yeah. Well, we're live, aren't we? So this is a difficult thing. But one thing that some of the guys are bringing up as well is the pharmaceuticals agencies that are involved in this. And we spoke about this morning, or at least me and Nick did, about an article that I read coming in this morning at whatever time it was. And it seems to me the pharmaceutical companies are employing individuals like this. And why are they employing individuals like this? Is it finance driven, or is it
change mindsets?
Change mindsets and gain financially.
Yes.
You know, so they're using the more expensive drugs and they're messing about with people's minds.
Yeah.
And then they're allowing them to, in fact, they're allowing some of them to take senior positions in government, and fly planes. And
train other people.
And train other people.
And of course, we've also seen common purpose at work within the military. And when we asked the MOD and the Royal Navy in particular how it was that a political charity could be using these techniques on people's minds, you're changing their views and values, how could you justify that within a military context? The Ministry of Defence didn't want to reply. But if you'd like to learn more, simply pop in Accelerate Experience, and here's Common Purpose Customise. So this is no longer being delivered simply through Common Purpose itself. But we've got a nice comment here from Karen Klatt from Lufthansa School of Business Management. Our senior executives required an experience to broaden their horizons and make them think about their own leadership. We were delighted with the Common Purpose Programme and its outcomes. It represented good value for money and had a real impact on the leaders who participated. Now, of course, we don't know what the impact was. If we look at what Common Purpose says, it's an intense learning journey, experiencing what it takes to lead change on complex problems, cutting-edge experiential techniques. What are those experiential techniques, and what are the effects they actually have on people's minds? And we've got Lufthansa now implicated basically in not checking the background history. So their leadership hasn't improved, it's worsened, isn't it?
Decreased, yeah.
Decreased. Well, there we are. What sort of man would support a political charity and travel all the way to India to help promote it? Well, it has to be this gentleman, and here he is. A wonderful tweet with the caption, whenever my niece sees David Cameron, she says, he's the silly man who looks like a train, and this is the said train. So we just thought, have a look at that little picture, get a feel for who they're talking about, and it is pretty close, isn't it?
We all need a little bit of humour as well, and yeah, the facial recognition is the same, isn't it?
Yes, it's sort of vacant stare. Yes. Well, we're going to say well done to this young lady, and at least Britain's children can now see Prime Minister David Cameron as a silly man. But we're going to add that they're not old enough or wise enough to realise that he's not silly, but politically very dangerous. And what we've got to remember is that we've entrusted him with our nation and our lives, because that's the reality of where we are. And of course, what are we going to get at the election? A rainbow coalition is our prediction.
Well, do you know that it's an interesting thing with this coalition? And I mean, I had a conversation with somebody earlier today on the phone, and they basically said, I mean, I've not been really watching the news because we've been developing the news ourselves, so I've not got time to sit in front of the TV, and I've not had that time all week.
Yeah.
But somebody said to me, what will Parliament actually look like with this Rainbow Coalition? I think we know what it looked like, but from what people are saying, the media in terms of BBC, ITV, Channel 4, etc.
Yeah.
Generally, when you're going up to an election, they say, well, they show you the House, don't they? The House of Commons, and this is what it looked like if the Lib Dems and Labour are in, or Conservatives, or the Greens, and then
Yeah.
you've got UKIP. And nobody's currently doing that. Why are they not doing that?
I think to add the drive towards a hung parliament to ensure we get that coalition in.
Yeah.
And remember, of course, it was the chief executive of the political charity Common Purpose that said back in 2007 the government was working on creating a coalition, and they were selecting people on how much guile they had. Devious guile.
Have they already done the deal?
I think
Sometimes
so.
that's what I think. They've done a little bit of an handshake, and a few brown envelopes are going in different people's pockets.
So a coalition in Parliament means no proper debate. What it simply means is collaboration and meetings decided before the meeting takes place.
Yeah.
So my view, it's a dictatorship. Well, let's have a look at Cameron again, because he's going to be in there somewhere. What's he been talking about? Well, he's made pledges that he's going to help the NHS. This is as he uses his other hand to cut them to pieces. So the Nottingham Post again, David Cameron's NHS pledges criticised by Nottingham doctors and politicians. Well, in the article it said here that Peter Holden, chairman of the British Medical Association in the East Midlands, says even if we've got the cash, where's the trained workforce? If you're going from a 5-day week to a 7-day week, it doesn't take a genius to work out you need 40% more staff. They don't exist. Even if we could recruit more, it would take years to train that workforce. From start to finish, it's 12 years minimum. So what's going on? Well, of course, this is the hollow reality of David Cameron's NHS pledges. Vote Conservative. You know, it makes sense. If you want to get rid of the NHS, our view is don't mess around. Get out there and vote for David Cameron, because you know exactly what he's going to do. I'll leave it there.
What are the Conservative Party? What are Conservative values? This is what people need to be asking themselves, because I don't think the Conservatives are the Conservatives anymore, are they?
No. Wolf in sheep's clothing, just as New Labour took over old Labour, New Labour under Tony Blair crept in, destroyed all of the old Labour socialist values, many of those values very good values. I think exactly the same thing has happened with the Conservative Party. Yeah. He calls himself a Conservative, but he's not.
No, definitely not.
Well, on the subject of the NHS, what better place to go than the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt? So the Mirror here reporting that he's been accused of burying a £10 million report setting out NHS cuts. Well, what have we got? The study by management consultants, including KPMG, is reported to recommend closing hospital beds, cutting A&E departments in 11 regions. Notice the word region, across England. But despite paying the $10 million for the advice, NHS England is refusing to publish the findings ahead of a general election. So this is the second major report. We got a police one they don't want to on rape. We don't want to give the public this report before the elections. We're too immature to understand. We need to wait till after the election.
You can't tell the public the truth.
No.
You can't. Is that what you're suggesting, that we tell the public the truth, that they do? MPs tell the public the truth?
Well, I think they get very worried about telling the truth at the moment. But we're just going to say again, because we are running up to the election, if we put that one back, if you would, Nick, here we go. We're going to say, for the final destruction of the NHS, vote Conservative or Lib Lab Con. You can choose any of the parties. It is going to be destroyed and privatised. And if you want it to happen quickly, get out there voting. Can we trust the police? We don't think so. We're going to go to Wales, North Wales, in fact, and the Daily Post, where Simon Newport, chairman of the North Wales Police Federation, has said that police officers have been warned not to wear uniform to travel to work because they're going to be topped by ISIS, apparently.
Really?
Well, I don't know whether the ISIS people will be wearing their daffodils, but apparently all the police in Wales got to be pretty worried about that. Should we just have a look at what he said here? Because it goes on. He said the advice is only precautionary. It's part of national guidance being given. Obviously, you don't expect a terrorist attack, but it could happen. When you're in uniform, you can present a target. ISIS have put out a video saying police officers are a fair target. It's about being aware of the dangers. As police officers, we face a double jeopardy because if we see a crime taking place off duty, we're supposed to intervene, but then we identified ourselves. Well, I don't know why he's worried about that, because what we're learning certainly about child abuse is, of course, that many police simply don't intervene and they're turning a blind eye to it. So are they ignoring child abuse to protect themselves from ISIS? Is that?
Well, yeah, it's a difficult one because people call them false flags or what have you, but there's certainly something going on. There's certainly an agenda going on.
Yeah.
The police force are hiring private companies to police our nation and set up groups up and down the country. We know for a fact, and obviously we're going to go into this in more detail, or you are, of events that are going to happen. Well, they're definitely going to happen in the coming weeks before the general election.
Indeed. Okay. Well, I'll take this opportunity to go straight into what is an additional section to the news, because over the last few days in particular, the UK column has been receiving a large amount of information from people who are deeply concerned at what is really happening politically in the country. We've been contacted by retired police officers. Indeed, there were some of those people present at the Telford conference. We've been contacted by retired intelligence service people. We have been contacted by professionals, of course, from the NHS, from within the civil service. And the basic story that is coming out from these individuals is the same. They are saying that there is an agenda to collapse society in this country with a view to helping install a new system of government. Presumably this is based on the Rainbow Coalition, but the UK column has consistently pointed out that it was Tony Blair who was stating that it was his objective to introduce a new system of government through the third sector, the Quango non-government organisations charity sector, where people would be appointed into power, they would not be elected. So that's going back to Tony Blair's day. And we have now got more and more professionals coming forward saying that something very sinister is going on in the country. And some of the most recent reports we've had have concerned the very damaging cuts to British military, where senior military officers are now saying we simply cannot defend the country because David Cameron's coalition is destroying our wherewithal to do that. Now, it's very unusual for senior military officers to speak out. They're normally immensely loyal, but it's now got to the stage we understand that those senior officers are warning and warning again that David Cameron is undermining the ability of this nation to defend itself. Let's couple that with the fact that we now have police officers who are prepared to whistleblow to say that it is absolutely true that senior British police officers, both in the Metropolitan Police and other police forces across the country, have deliberately destroyed information relating to child abuse and child abuse inquiries. They've hidden information, they've lied, they've perjured themselves, all to protect a vicious system of child trafficking, exploitation and abuse, which is clearly well known about by not only British political circles, but also by the higher levels of the British establishment. So faced with this information, which as we say has been increasing, particularly over the last few weeks and certainly the last few days, we felt it was time to really warn the British public what is going to come, particularly if we, the public, don't do the right thing. Now, before I add to that, I would like to just go back to some of the words that I've spoken about in the past, and indeed the UK column, and I'll take you back to 2007 when we gave a talk in Plymouth. I entitled it The Hunt for Red October, which I've used before. And what is the point of this title? Well, it's this. Essentially, if we remember the Tom Clancy book, Hunt for Red October being a submarine, a very dangerous submarine. But the thing about submarines is you don't usually see them. The menace is there, but it's under the surface of the sea, which can look perfectly calm and inviting. So if we know what we're looking for, we can see that there is a beast lurking underneath. Well, what's all this got to do with British politics? What I'm going to say is that many people have been warning over a great many years that something very nasty and subversive was at work within the political system within UK. And I'm going to say today with some force that it's clear to us that that beast is now emerging and showing that the intention is to utterly destroy the normal order and behaviour of this country. Well, who gave some clues? This book is one of the best one, in my opinion, written by a gentleman called Christopher Story, unfortunately no longer with us, the European Union Collective, Enemy of its Member States. And if you get hold of this, you can download it as a PDF from the internet. In this book, with immense analysis, a lot of very detailed footnotes as well, Christopher Story described the subversion of British politics in order to take on a new quasi-Marxist, fascist political system, which we are happy to call communitarian. And if you want to know, John has just indicated something has changed with the Labour Party. We know something's changed with the Conservative Party. What we think that is a change from traditional political values to communitarianism, which is effectively a dictatorship with some elements of Marxism and some elements of global corporations and fascism. In this book, you can see this very important table. And what this table describes is what steps were to be taken in order to, first of all, demoralise Britain as a nation, and then to destabilise and finally destroy Britain as a nation. The key areas here, very easy to see: religion, education, media, culture, law and order, family, health, race, labour. Let's have a look at what they said. Well, basically, religion, for example, was going to be politicised and commercialised. It was going to put on par with entertainment. Education was going to encourage permissiveness and relativity. Media was going to monopolise people's thoughts. It was going to manipulate people and discredit. And my goodness, doesn't that simply sum up the BBC to date? And have a look at culture. We were to be swamped with false heroes and role models. And of course, at the moment, we've got that as everything from footballers to Lady Gaga and some pretty unpleasant stuff going on in the pop industry. What was that going to achieve, which is the right-hand column? Well, just messing around with those areas, the intent was to create an ignorant, uninformed and addictive mass of people who really got a death wish because they got no morality to sustain them. But look at law and order. It was going to make legislative, not moral, rights versus obligations. And they were going to get in amongst the security services and the armed forces. And that was going to be collapsed to lead to defencelessness. Foreign policy, we could only work with the permission of friends. We see Tony Blair, David Cameron doing that within the EU. And we follow it through. Once we get into the population, we're going to be taken off the land. And of course, what has the UK column in the British Constitution Group been reporting over many weeks now, that people's property is literally being stolen from under their feet through corrupt courts. And this was going to be a programme that eventually was increased until it led to destabilisation of the country. So the first part of the programme, due to last about 25-30 years, I'm going to suggest that our research and knowledge shows that we're now entering the destabilisation phase. And what are we looking at? We're looking at trouble with the economy, trouble in politics, trouble in society. And in this document from the 1970s from Thomas Schuman, it even uses the word Big Brother. But where does this take us? Well, it takes us to crisis. And what does that mean? It actually means violence on the streets. And if you think, well, there's no problem because it ends with normalisation being achieved, then you need to understand that normalisation under the Marxist regime means you do not have any say. You are the state. And if you disagree with the state, you go to a psychiatric unit or the Gulag. That is normalisation. Well, have a look at these comments. The Scotsman. If Britain were like Nazi Germany, the Muslim population in Britain would not be as numerous as it is today, would it, Dr. Nazim? Muslim chief says Britain police state like Nazi Germany, or in this case, the Nazi calling the non-Nazis Nazis. But Mohammed Nazim, chairman of Birmingham Central Mosque, urged Muslims to show restraint. Crumbling spires, Islam. One recent tradition of this country is for Nazim to compare the UK with Nazi Germany and to dismiss the threat of Islamic terrorism as a government plot. The Telegraph raids in Birmingham were comparable to the Nazis' persecution of the Jews. A spokesman for Mr. Cameron said it was clear that Dr. Nazim enjoyed, what it added there was enjoyed sort of stirring up trouble. An Islamic community leader today compared the political situation in Britain with Nazi Germany. And all of these articles were attacking this gentleman who we invited to give a talk in Plymouth in 2007. And Dr. Mohammed Nazim was the chairman of Birmingham Central Mosque. And in an excellent presentation, he warned an audience which was largely professional, probably Christian, but based obviously in the Plymouth area as opposed to the Midlands. Dr. Nazim warned very clearly that something very dark and evil was starting to eat away at the political and democratic structure of Britain. And he was brave enough to stand in front of the audience in Plymouth to warn again and again that Britain was descending into a vicious police state where the police in some circumstances could be compared to Nazi Germany. Now, I'm going to say to you, John, we've talked about the police smashing their way into people's houses to take their children with social services. We've had police smashing into houses in order to take property. This is the reality of Britain in 2015, and this gentleman was warning about it.
And they ignore their code of conduct.
Indeed.
Which is protect the public. You know, and they don't do that. We had a case yesterday, didn't we, with an individual that had a little child. She had a little child with her, and they were trying to smash her way into the house whilst the child is crying, and the mother's obviously deeply upset. And the police are assisting with such criminality. So they're creating a crime, but they believe that their oath of office and their code of conduct doesn't apply to them anymore. I don't know why that is. And again, I'll mention Melanie Shaw, because I know a few people wanted me to do that. And Melanie's situation, they acted like Nazis. The police did it in Nottingham, and they dragged her away, and these trumped up claims that she broke the laws are utter rubbish because it's about paedophilia, and she was another whistleblower getting involved in there. So just to push it in there, on Sunday, there's going to be an event in Peterborough, especially for Melanie Shaw. So if we can get that out there as well, guys, and if you can help out and support them, I believe Tom Crawford is also doing a speech up there about corruption and the system. So that's quite important. And the footage, Mark Anderson, that will be, I believe, will be 3 o'clock when we can get that out on air. Yeah, I'm told. So look forward to that because it's a good interview.
Indeed. So if we stay on this, we are remembering that a very brave man, Dr. Mohammed Nazim, was prepared to stand up in front of a largely white audience in Plymouth and warn again that Britain was sliding into a vicious police state. What happened? Britain's press and media turned on him. They accused him of all sorts of things. They ridiculed him. They laughed at him. But what that man said then, we are now experiencing now. And I'll add to what John has just said. Of course, the UK column has reported a number of individuals, mainly women, who have tried to expose paedophile rings. What has the British state done with them? It has put them in psychiatric units and forcibly medicated them, their crime standing up to try and protect children. Well, if you don't want to believe the warning from Dr. Mohammed Nazim, perhaps you might like to take the warning from this very brave gentleman, Harry Beckoff, unfortunately no longer with us. This is a picture of him on his 100th birthday. He was formerly working at Bletchley Park. He was a cipher officer and a very good one. He knows what the Nazi regime was about. And here is one of Harry's books in which Harry is warning about the creation of effectively a new dictatorship in Europe, which was going to suck Britain in. So if we just go very simply through the sorts of things these individuals and many others have been warning about, it's to do with this. It's an attack on our society. We're looking at demoralizing the nation. We're certainly looking at destroying the family, because if you weaken or destroy the family, individuals are much easier for the state to get to grips with. And of course, we want to undermine our youth so that they do not grow into strong, well-adjusted adults. We're going to promote sexual promiscuity and we're going to sexualize children in school. That is happening. It's happening on a day-by-day, year-by-year basis. We're destroying proper education, so children leave school ill-equipped to deal with the basics of a good life. We're undermining the police, we're retraining them, we're reframing them to be aggressive and paramilitary. That is in our face. We are undermining and destroying the armed forces, we're destroying the NHS, collapsing the economy, we're undermining and collapsing the rule of law and national institutions. And this is where we get to the key material. We're dividing people in communities and antagonizing them. And the reason that this is being done by our very own political establishment is in order to create violence on the streets. And that, of course, would give the perfect opportunity to bring in draconian laws, curfews, to make sure that liberty has been stripped away at one go. Now, the reason we have given that summary is because the intelligence coming into UK column from a great many professional people is that the agenda is to create violence on the streets by using division between people over the subject of child abuse. And in particular, the targeted area will be relations between the wider Christian community in this country and Muslims and Asians. And how is this going to be created? We've had retired police warning us about this. We've got retired military people warning us about this. A effectively establishment agenda to have these people at each other's throats, blaming the other side for child abuse. What better example than Thames Valley Police, where, of course, it has only been the UK column that warned and reported again and again that when a very brave Asian gentleman, a good Samaritan, went to Thames Valley Police some 80 times to report that white men were abusing white children, Thames Valley Police took no proper action and stood in the sidelines while effectively this gentleman was abused, hounded out of his job and victimised. At the same time, of course, there was massive publicity at the convictions of Asians who had been involved in child abuse, and indeed the media such as the BBC took great delight in even going to local mosques to ask Muslims what they thought about child abuse and the paedophiles. And as the Muslims said at the time, why don't you visit churches when the abuse of children is carried out by white people? Well, of course, the reason Britain's media was doing this was in order to create hostility and division between communities. This brings us to Rotherham. This is a little collection of articles. We've got The Guardian here saying the government is to take over Rotherham Council after damning child exploitation report. Notice nobody has been convicted, nobody has been brought into court about this abuse. And here's the BBC. It can't even sort out abuse in its own organisation, but they're happy to promote that 1,400 children have been abused by gangs of men in Rotherham. And in many of their reports, of course, they're happy to brand those people as Asians and Muslims. We've got a headline here in the article I've just shown you. It's loud and clear: networks of Asian men. And yet what we are not seeing is any full and proper investigation by the police as to the gangs of white men, including people in the political circles. That's all being ignored. The Telegraph here, the same thing: 1,400 children exploited by Asian gangs while authorities turned a blind eye. So Asian, but we can make no progress on Elm Guest House. We can make no progress on Dolphin Square. We can make no progress on white abusers associated with British Parliament. Well, let's enter the Crown Prosecution Service. Remember that Crown Prosecution Service under Alison Saunders worked extremely hard to ensure that abuse victim Melanie Shaw of Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham, was banged up in prison on very dubious charges. She's still there. But here is the Crown Prosecution Service boasting about the Asian names that have been sentenced as a result of child abuse. So the state focus is Asian, Muslim, Islam, paedophilia. That's the message being put across. There is an underlying message that the only abusers are in fact men. Well, this is a lie, because of course statistics show that roughly 50% of child abusers are women, not according to the British press. And we have a focus on the Asian community. We have total protection of abuse rings being run by some pretty powerful white men. Well, that brings us back to the silly man on the train, because here's David Cameron on the left saying, with regard to Operation Bullfinch, the police investigation into the abuse of children in Oxford, more needs to be done to tackle child abuse. But of course, it took very brave Simon Danczuk to say, well, actually, this is David Cameron who's saying there's nothing to see, move on, there's no child abuse in Westminster. And Simon Danczuk, we have to say, is apparently coming under vicious pressure from the establishment in order to get him to back off from exposing paedophiles within Westminster, or people who've been previously involved as members of Parliament. A lot of pressure coming on this man. On one occasion in the early days, of course, he had the wheel nuts loosened on the wheels of his car. Deliberate attempt, I would guess, for him to suffer harm or injury. Well, David Cameron is clearly starting to run very worried at the moment, and the UK column reported that he'd been enlisting military police to help protect him. If we just pop him up on screen, Nick, if we can, thank you. There he is. Well, what's he been up to? This was the key bit. As the police start to have internal problems between the police who are covering up child abuse and the police who want to expose it, obviously they're a little bit uncertain for Mr. Cameron. So he's gone to bring in the military police for his protection, and we said that additional Royal Navy personnel are being trained in close protection to support those people. We asked this question some time ago: is he frightened by the British voters, or had he been a naughty boy in Russia? Well, we're going to say that David Cameron has been naughty in both areas. But what seems to be happening now in Westminster is absolute terror as more and more information comes to the surface over child abuse connected with British politicians. And this brings us to the reports of the professionals who've been kind enough to contact us over the last few days, because they believe it's their personal assessments, not factual, but it's their assessments, that there is an agenda to create violence on the streets, and they're saying that that agenda will be focused on Rotherham, and the agenda will be based on accusations of child abuse from the Asian community. Meanwhile, white so-called Christian abusers are totally ignored by the mainstream press and media. This information we thought was so significant that we wanted to make people aware of it. Of course, UK Column has consistently said that if we want to correct the political system at the moment, people must remain peaceful, we must keep people together, and we certainly must not allow this devious, subversive criminal cabal in Westminster to undermine relations between good people within communities. So that is our warning today, and I will end on the fact that we have warned time and time again that the real political agenda in this country is treason. Happily, it's not just the UK Column that's saying this. This was Breitbart pointing out that when the army may be cut to 50,000, the smell of treason is becoming offensive, and they are absolutely right reporting here that we are witnessing treason. UK Column has reported everything from the British military being given to the French, to British students being betrayed to debt, slavery, and public spending decimated to pay for a banking mafia. Let's look at the full horrible picture. Of course, this was a mix of Cameron and Nick Clegg, but we continually have warned of treason. And if we go back to 2008, with one of our earlier newspapers, we were predicting back then that Britain was going to be abolished. We were warning of treason, and we actually said that the path to the abolition of any form of democracy in this country was the fact that Parliament would be closed on the excuse of refurbishment works. I think we got that right. Well, we'll end you on this. We've been very sad at the disastrous, pathetic reporting by the Daily Mail recently. We shouldn't have been surprised, because in this edition of the UK Column, we reported how the Daily Mail ran a major article on the need to get rid of plastic bags and ignored 3,000 demonstrators outside Parliament who were trying to warn that Britain was being subsumed into a dictatorship. There's the word treason again. We've used it time and time again. Our warning today is that from information we are receiving, there appears to be an intent by unknown people within the British government and establishment to help foment violence on the streets. We believe the target area is Rotherham. We believe the subject area is child abuse. We would like to say to people of all colours, backgrounds, religions, do not fall into this trap. It's up to all of us to work together to restore law and order, the Constitution and common law to this country. That's it from me. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you take our warning seriously. Thank you. Bye-bye.